Hello there, dear viewer. Have you recently been accused of being racist? Well, fret not. If you sub to this channel during Black History Month, you can disprove all of those allegations in 1 second. So drop a sub. When I first saw the trailer for this game, I had mixed opinions. It didn't look like a typical Platinum Studio game with high octane and exciting combat, but at the same time it didn't look god-awful either. And as much as I'm getting tired of the AAA gaming experience, I was willing to welcome something new from one of my favorite studios. But little did I know, a demo for Babylon's Fall will be dropping just a few weeks before the game release, giving everyone a chance to try the game for themselves. So I decided to give it a try and let the world know what kind of game they could be expecting. Babylon's Fall? More like Babylon failing to be anything I wanted to play. More like Babylon falling into the trash. So Babylon Fall starts us off with the character creation screen, and I immediately noticed something glaringly game-breakingly wrong. These characters look like shit, like Dark Souls 1 shit. I can't remember the last time I seen characters this bad. In the second issue, Platinum Studios apparently doesn't know what the fuck black people look like. This is not a black skin tone. Babylon falling into obscurity because these graphics are awful. Which is why I'm going to separate this video into my day 1 and day 2 experience. Day 2 being when I started writing this script. So, day 1. So if the character creation screen wasn't a dead giveaway, the cutscenes themselves don't exactly look the best. I don't even remember what the opening of the game was, but it's been dragging on long enough, so I just started skipping the cutscenes because I kind of want to get into the gameplay. So Babylon Falls is a 3D action RPG game. It features 4 weapons, 2 for light and heavy attacks, which are tied to the square and triangle button, and 2 for special attacks tied to the R2 and L2. Now there aren't really any combos, and you spend your gameplay dodging around enemies doing basic attacks until they die, weaving in a few special attacks when you can help it to, speed up the process of killing them. There's no easy way to sugarcoat this. I almost dropped the game after the first level. No, I almost dropped it during the first level. Now a lot of people, when they hear you say you didn't like something, they like to attribute it to, failed expectations. We expect games like Astro Chain and Bayonetta, and then, getting something different, we're going to, of course, hate it because it's different. So let me say this. I expected nothing from this game based off the trailer. In fact, I actually went through the 5 stages of grief before the trailer even finished. I accepted the fact that this was going to be something way different than what the Platinum games is used to, and also probably garbage, but But I was not ready for what the game was actually going to be. The combat just doesn't feel good. It's a very simple and mashy combat with no combos or death. There's no stagger animation for the enemies, meaning when they get hit, they kind of just stand there instead of reacting to the damage, which honestly was one of the biggest issues for me. It makes the combat feel lifeless and less exciting. You're just wailing on these enemies with no reaction for the most part. And I never like action games like this because it breaks the immersion for me. It doesn't feel like this intense fight to the death because the only one who reacts to getting hit is me. And oh boy, does your character react. When you get knocked down, it takes you like 3 seconds to get back up every single time. And there is nothing you can do about it. You can't, break your fall or something. You just gotta hold that, which is again, really immersion breaking when the game tries to be this fast-paced action game, but every time you get knocked down, you have to wait so long before you can rejoin the action, which are big problems for me on its own, but it does get worse from there. Because of the camera and the size of the enemies, it is genuinely so hard to actually see when you're about to get hit, either by enemies off screen or enemies right next to you. Everything is so small and flashy that it's hard to pay attention to enemies literally right next to you. So now I'm just getting gangbanged with not much I can do about it, which might be fun on a Sunday night after a few drinks, not something I want in a video game where I can die from it. You use your special attacks in this swinging the blade around, hitting the enemies with a wet paper towel. What is this even doing? What is this even doing, game? But hold on, viewer, we're almost there. The level design, the fucking level design is garbage. It's all just one giant arena connected by hallways. Walk up the steps to fight in this ring, walk down the hallway to fight in that ring, with no difference in design or added elements to make any of this feel engaging or unique. Wait, I'm sorry. As you're walking down the hallway, sometimes there are spikes for you to jump over, and sometimes there's a gust of wind to blow you down the hallway. Ooh, so unique, so different. Babylon Fall? More like Babylon falling in player numbers, more like garbage falling onto my PlayStation floor. So that was just the first mission. And after each mission, you sit down at a table and everyone just explains a bunch of stuff to you. Now, it's possible that the abundance of sleeping pills that I took made this seem a little bit more boring than it might have been. But regardless, I was falling asleep during them, so I skipped them. I have no idea what the story is of this game. But right before I started the second mission, the game asked me if I wanted to queue up with other players. And that's when it dawned on me that this wasn't an action RPG game where you can play with other players, but an action RPG MMO game. Think of something akin to Destiny, which radically changes how you approach the game. And because of that, I decided to get some rest and see how I felt about the game in the morning. The table talks after every mission is so boring hell, and I skip it every time. Pills had nothing to do with that. Now that I'm well rested, I wanted to revisit the idea that I had from last night. That Babylon Falls wasn't an action RPG game with co-op similar to, say, Monster Hunter, but something more akin to an MMO game that has been stripped and compressed into an action game, trying to blend the two worlds, which is why I compared it to Destiny 2. Because when you think about it, the arenas are really just dungeons. The enemies not reacting to your attacks are normal for an MMO, and the level designs for dungeons being mostly the same as normal for an MMO. And I figured the enemy placements were designed around other players being there to stop you from getting gangbanged. And the design of enemies themselves are pretty basic and nothing special, and Jesus, a bit boring sometimes. Again, pretty normal for an MMO game. Before I concluded my thoughts on the game, I wanted to test this theory out. So before I joined co-op to defeat the boss for this dungeon, I went back and built up my character to the degree that the game allowed me to. I equipped better armor pieces that I found and went through and tested each and every weapon in the basic attack slot and then the special attack slot. See, any weapon can be used in either slot, functioning as your basic attacks or using it for a special mechanic. The sword has a basic light attack and a heavy attack, as well as Astral Blade for a special attack. While I initially thought that this was pretty creative and allows you to create unique builds for your characters, I quickly realized it didn't change much, because this game is just too simple and basic. While I'm going to save my overall thoughts and comparisons for the end of the script, I will say this: most of the weapons all do the same thing. I come across two melee weapons so far, the sword and the hammer. Now while they feel different to use, a fast sword versus a slower hammer, of course they're going to be a bit different. As special weapons, they both just function as melee attacks. You have ranged weapons, the staff and the bow. Both feel god awful to use to me. You see how long this takes? Do you see how long it takes to hit someone with these weapons? But again, as special weapons, you can either shoot a ranged arrow or shoot a ranged fireball, or charge up your ranged arrow or charge up your ranged fireball. While there are some support abilities, like some staffs can buff your team and apparently the shield can taunt and create a shield, I couldn't get this to work, but apparently it's in the game. For most of the weapons, they don't provide any different function or change the gameplay up in any way. For the most part, they all do the same thing. So I just went with whatever seemed to do the most damage, which for me was the hammer. So I have what some may consider a character build. I queued up to fight the boss, and you know what? I somewhat enjoyed myself. The dungeon for the boss had a bit more going on, floors collapsing, rain all over the place. I don't know, I'll take anything at this point. But you know what? Combat actually did feel better with other players to distract the 10 enemies from murdering me. Who would have thunk? Who could have figured out that other players to distract the 20 enemies from killing me made the game more fun? I mean, it's still basic and lacking anything meaningful to it, but with other players, there are less things to get in your way of just playing the game. And when I finally got to the boss fight, it was actually surprisingly kind of fun. Giant enemy with some badass music playing in the background. Interesting mechanics like summoning walls of blaze that you have to break through as we slowly chip away at his health. And even one time, he trapped me in a circle of blaze with himself, and I immediately went, oh my fucking god, please don't kill me, I am so sorry. And after finally beating the boss, I thought maybe the game wasn't as bad as my initial impressions. But just to test out one last thing, I did the next dungeon by myself. And yep, playing this game solo still makes me feel like it's the most boring game I've ever played in in my life. Like, oh my god, what did they do to this game? But I feel like this was a good stopping point for my playthrough. Babylon Falls was a weird game. Platinum Games has sadly admitted that they want to lean away from these high-octane, amazingly fun, single-player focused games to make live service games to pull in more money, which you can see from the Battle Pass. And as much as that sucks, I feel like I'm justifiable in comparing it to other live service games. Destiny 2 is a game that I play almost every week. It has the best feeling shooting in any game that I've played, and while its maps and designs aren't, amazing, they at least add something to your firefight. Enemies in high areas, covering things to hide behind, sometimes a unique mechanic for that area. But most of all, abilities that makes it feel like you're playing the game differently when you have them equipped. If we were to compare the Destiny class abilities to using weapons as special attacks in Babylon's Fall, as the Voidwalker in Destiny 2, I have my grenade, which can either explode into smaller grenades taking out a group of enemies or suck them in for more damage. My melee ability activates Devour, which fully heals me when I kill an enemy, and my super is a giant orb of void energy that does a lot of single target damage. This directly affects the way I play the game. This build allows me to be a lot more aggressive, getting in enemy faces, bombing clusters of enemies, and then activating Devour, which turns each fight into a scramble of if the enemy can kill me before I can kill them. And that's just one class. You also have the Stasis class, which focuses on freezing enemies and creating diamond structures. These create different playstyles and builds for the players to use that greatly affects how you play the game. There is no real difference whether I use a hammer or the sword in the ability slot. No difference if I use a longbow or a scepter, because they're both going to take half a century to shoot out the projectile. And that's the biggest problem with Babylon's Fall. It tried to combine two different genres but doesn't take the strength of any of them. A fast-paced action game that feels underwhelming due to a simple combat, lack of reactions from enemies, kinda mid-level design, and special attacks that don't really change anything. Which many of those things might be normal in an MMO game, but an MMO game also provides things in return. Large-scale battles, long dungeon runs, and most of all, builds. You have AoE attacks, nukes, critical attacks, bleed damage, summoning. In Final Fantasy XIV, you can build up gauges which can unleash your full power once activated. And it's possible that Babylon's Fall may begin to incorporate these things as you play the game more. And you know what, if it does, then Platinum Games needs to rethink how they designed the progression for this game, because these early dungeons are not a good start. They do not leave a good impression of your game. But Babylon Fall feels like a game that borrows elements from different genres without incorporating things that actually made them good and fun. It's a mediocre action game and it's a mediocre live service game. And those two sides come together to make a game that I found borderline torture to play alone and decent with playing in a squad. So how do you recommend a game like that? How can I suggest paying $60 for this game when you could just play games like Destiny 2, Genshin Impact, or Final Fantasy XIV or Guild Wars for free? Hell, you can just buy Monster Hunter for like $20. I don't know who this game is for. So unless Platinum Games rethinks how they designed this game, I will not be spending a single dime on Babylon Falls. So that's the end of the video. I was not expecting the game to be like this. I went in with an open mind. I gave it the best I could, and there's just not a lot going for it. It's kind of bland and uninteresting. But if you played Babylon Falls, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. And I don't know, just give me your opinion of the game. If you haven't played it, choose out the trailers. It's kind of neat. If you like, oh, that looks kind of shit, and you watch this video and you're like, yeah, that's about what I expected, let me know down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to drop a like and sub to my channel, and peace. Thanks for watching. Also, it's Black History Month. Sub to the channel.